Honestly, I would
When I was young, my uncle took me out to the desert, gave me a shotgun, didn't give me any instructions, he said, here, shoot that rock over there, and I did. And then after he picked me up off the ground, he says, you learned, didn't you?
I think so.
He was a police officer.
I would love to do it.
Then he went to the army.
Probably only
Long and retired.
And a deer out there.
Got another retirement from that. Gave me my first
You in a
rifle.
deer uniform.
I don't know how many people were killed from it. They came from the sheriff's today, one of our kids over there.
Don't.
I would take the bolt out, set it aside. And my actual knife. Lock it up, be able to use it. No, it's very old. I used to take my scout for training. Full swingers, I just had a target up out.
It's fall. It'll be
Shots all over the target.
Yeah.
So I took the gun, and I get one shot to see where it's shooting, I shot one shot, and then put 5 right there. And I said, and you're saying that there's something wrong with this gun?
So I guess that's how I
Gun acting is purely experience, reading properly, squeezing that trigger. You know, when hands are like this, there's tendons, the shots go down, they go over. Hold that bolt off, and then trigger to do your fix. Amazing how much more accuracy you get.
so everything's not a bad thing.
I spent a whole day on that at the training center. I'm both in RA training.
They want to go, they want to do it all.
It's not as big.
So everybody wants to have a shooting range training one day?
Yes.
I have to call up to
They're
Isaac
doing,
Walton.
yeah, call somebody.
Our attendance would be up, they said, even more.
I got their number.
They said something about maybe a party buses afterwards. They
Party bus, absolutely.
You know?
We've got guns and rifles that people can shoot.
Exercise for you, Marvin. You can have people fall backwards and catch each other, and then you can go shoot guns, right?
They would better go the other way.
There you go. No, I think it's, everybody, all these groups I talk to, when I talk about guns, they say that was the most fun we've ever had if they do just that. They go out and shoot guns. It's kind of a security core thing. It gets people really involved. And then people find, well, we don't have just dry didactics, but we actually went out and shot. I really like guns, and I'm not scared of guns. I don't think it's a Scorpion anymore, and I touched it, and I feel comfortable around it. You don't have to go out and buy one, but if you see one on the street, then you at least know what it's all about. You know where the gun should be pointed. You have some of this basic stuff. You can get somebody up to speed on guns in probably an hour. You know, I mean, you can tell them, these are the basics of the gun. I'm not saying you'd be proficient shooting. You're not shooting out 100 yards, you know, with a handgun or something like that. You're not going to hit all the metal plates as you shoot them down, you know, if you're a black belt or whatever it happens to be. But I think you can get up to speed on it, and then it's not scary. It's just sort of immersing yourself.
So, one thing that there's been a change in, and a lot of states are now legalizing suppressors.
Right.
And the fallacy of this is on TV, you see these people getting shot and there's no noise coming from the gun. And that's not true. A suppressor suppresses the noise. It helps your hearing from damage from a gun.
Maybe I'll work on trying to set up something maybe out at Isaac Walton. They could probably do a little class ahead of time on that in just a minute. It's hard to get word in edgewise with her. Just say, so set something up so that we maybe have a little training and have some hands-on with something. I mean, if you know, I mean, interesting. I actually, with this class coming up, I actually went and took one of them concealed carry classes.
Right.
Just, you know, just to learn a little bit about it. that 1 hour class I heard about lasted 7 hours. Pretty long, but, you know, a lot of information, and then shooting after a handgun. I hadn't shot a handgun. Holy cow, I mean, it's a little different, so I'll work on setting something like that up.
It gives you a little bit more respect for the gun, if you know what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, I mean, I learned quite a bit.
No, yes, I think it's huge. I mean, back to the idea of you're an American, you have an opportunity to do this, and even if you don't shoot every weekend or every other weekend, or you get your gun out, it's a closet gun, you get it out every 6 months or something like that, I don't think there's any problem with that. And I mean, I think, and then you parlay that into hunting, I think, you know, hunting will give you a vastly increased respect for life and the damage that guns can do. If you just do squirrel hunting to start with, but anybody who's ever shot a deer knows the devastating effects of a gun. So all those things, I mean, that's kind of it's an opportunity that you have as an American that you don't have, and I think I beat that into the ground, those ideas. But yeah, the fact that you can have a concealed carry permit now, I mean, as opposed to like say 10 years ago when Rundy was a sheriff, I mean, you had to give everything but your firstborn a DNA sample, and if you didn't think you needed a gun, it was forget about it. So thankfully, the legislature has said, you know, if anything, we're going to liberalize these gun laws, and we'll see what happens. But I don't get the idea that people are going to start. It's not going to be the Wild West, and you know, Wild Bill Hickok is not going to suddenly reappear and manifest, and people will not be shooting each other in the streets. Heinlein, I think I said this earlier to somebody, but Robert Heinlein is a author. He did a lot of science fiction stuff, but he said an armed society is a polite society. Has anyone heard that quote before? An armed society is a polite society. So I think he was very right about that. And he wasn't a gun nut. He just wrote a lot of stuff. I think he did Starship Trooper. If you've ever read that book, it's made into a movie, but that's Heinlein, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, but I would definitely recommend, yeah. If you learn another language, that's awesome. If you learn how to cook a cake or make something on the stove, that's cool too. And this is no different from that. It's just another skill set that makes you a more well-rounded person. You can talk about stuff, and you're not sort of out of the conversation when people get to talking about their 12 gauge versus their 8 gauge versus their AR-15 or something. You have something to contribute. It makes you more well-rounded. All right.
Part two.
Yeah, part two. So now we're gonna delve more into the sort of, now we know about guns. We know what happens when people get shot with guns in terms of sort of the physics of it. Let's talk about the physiology and the pathology of it. So I really like this slide. So this it says, only Annie can judge me. I think that's hilarious. Anyway, fuck just to start with, so if someone's shot with a gun and then you come upon the scene, you find the person on the floor, and then you know kind of the idea of what we do. This is not the same as an old lady who fell and maybe has a C-spine fracture. In most cases, I think, my personal opinion is the C-spine is a non-issue. There's not penetrating trauma to that, and it wasn't a significant fall. They weren't shot and then fell off a building. But I'm not sure that the C-spine is a hugely important thing, and especially if it impinges their airway or causes problems, then I would not recommend it. You're not worried about the bones themselves being fractured. I mean, if they have penetrating wound to the neck, and we'll discuss that later, then that's something that just needs to be watched, probably. But just because someone was shot does not necessitate C-spine protocols. So, I mean, ATLS has specific ideas about things. There's a kind of a sister organization or a side organization called this PHTLS, and they don't think it's important. And most of the guys that go through the military's combat casualty care course, I think they would say that the C-spine issue is a non-issue. It doesn't need to be done. They're a bigger fish to fry when someone's been shot several times in terms of taking care of those people. The combat casualty care course, I don't give it a whole lot of treatment in this, but essentially out of all of our experiences, all these expeditionary effects of being in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is something that's kind of grown up out of all those military conflicts. Body armor is so good now that people weren't getting a whole lot of penetrating armor. They have ceramic plate armor, and so that was stopping an AK-47. That's a different talk. That's a tactical medicine talk. But you have 2A, 2B, then you go into 3, 3A. It used to be back in the day, 10 years ago, you needed to almost have a barricade in front of you to stop some of these long guns. But some of those long gun rounds, especially from the AK, will be stopped with ceramic plate armor. That's expensive. It's heavy. These are the guys that have the groin protectors on. If you ever see those pictures, so they don't get their balls, blown off, or if they're stepping over something, they don't lacerate a femoral artery. But that stuff could potentially stop in an AK round. But the point is, those people who were dying earlier, they were dying from tension pneumothorax, they were dying from extremity exsanguination. all right, and they were dying from airway issues, and they were shot in the neck. And so that's really what that combat casualty care course is focused on. But those are people who are in war zones, and we talk about ATLS, this is civilian medicine, so not as many sort of parallels. I own all these guns up until now. This is one I don't own. But when I say the Chicago Broom, Chicago Sweeper, the Chicago Typewriter, the Chicago Piano, the Chicago Style, the Chicago Organ Grinder, and the Chop Oven. What does that mean? I don't have one of these. I shoot 45. But if you watch any gangster movie, this is a general who came up with the Thompson machine gun. That's back in the day when everything was full auto, so you could just pull the trigger and then just zippity zip zip. Yeah. So then it was in World War. Yeah, this is a World War I pick. Really famous in gangster movies. Breaks apart. And this is maybe where Kalashnikov received some of his inspiration, because you see there really aren't that many parts. So if you just field disassemble this, you can see it comes apart pretty easily. There's not a whole lot to it. You can do a more detailed breakdown of the firing pin, the mechanism, extractor and stuff, but you can see there's not a whole lot to the gun. So it came out in 21. It was called the Persuader, the Annihilator. It fired in 45. So it was, World War I, the Great War, and then the gun that made the 20s roar. And then of course, if you look at all these individuals, John Dillinger, Al Capone, involved in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, that was an Italian mob who shot up the Irish mob. Do you know who Michael Collins is? Familiar with that? When I say Michael Collins to you in reference to Irish history, does anybody know what that means? I think it's worthwhile, just an aside. I don't want to just talk about dead people. I want to talk about other stuff that interests me. So Michael Collins, if you ever go to Ireland, he was a Cork guy. He's out of Cork, Ireland. How many people are Irish here? Probably not many. No, a few. Okay. So Michael Collins is basically the George Washington of the Irish Republic. Anybody heard of that before? Okay, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Easter Rebellion. You guys all know that history. So that's when a guy named Eamon Valera and Michael Collins got together, and they said, well, we don't really like British rule. They had the Croke Park Massacre. There's a lot of things that happened. You can read about all that stuff. Well, Michael Collins essentially was an Irish guy, and they called him the tall man. He was like 6'4", which was unusual back in the early, turn of the century. Most people weren't big like that because of nutrition issues. But he was basically the man who single-handedly brought the British Empire to its knees. So at that time, they'd been major imperialists. They had interest in India. They'd been in America. They'd been all over in Canada, places like that. And the Irish didn't want to be controlled anymore by the British. And so Eamon Valera and a bunch of guys, basically using Tommy guns and guns that they kind of begged, borrowed, and steal, were able to bring the Irish to the bargaining table, and that's where the Republic of Ireland comes from today. So my point is that not only bad guys, but quote-unquote good guys. I mean, it depends on them. If you're a British nationalist, you say Michael Collins is a piece of shit, and you hate that guy. You don't like Michael Collins at all. If you're an Irish nationalist and you say, well, I think that Ireland should at least be partly Irish and not all British, and we should still speak Irish and Gaelic, I'm revealing some of my own biases. Anyway, Michael Collins, that's what Michael Collins is all about. If you've not seen the movie by Neil Jordan, I'd recommend it. If you're at all Irish, you're all interested in the subject. If you're a hardcore German, Anglo-Saxon, fella, and you don't really have any interest in that, then don't watch the movie, because there's a bunch of poor British guys that get whacked, but a bunch of Irish guys die in it too. But I think it's a very interesting movie. But this is an Anglo kind of Irish community, Germanic community, so you should know about Michael Collins. I try not to do any more asides. I get interested in these things, so I'll continue on. All right. Oh, spinal immobilization, again, I think the idea of immobilizing somebody on the backboard, getting them all tied up, and that takes time. You know from your own experiences that takes time. And so we talked about whether or not these people need to have seat collars on. I would say ultimately don't. For our purposes, for Paramount's purposes, if you're involved in it, don't worry about it. Unless they fell off a building, they fell, or in a car accident after they were shot, and there's potential that they have some kind of injury to the neck. Otherwise, it's a non-issue for us. I've talked about Nexus with all my volunteer services. I've beaten that into the ground. Everybody know what Nexus criteria is? Pretty sure what Nexus criteria is. It's what I use every day. It's old data, but it's held up. It's proven itself. Anybody know how you clear a C-spine? If there's any question, let's talk about that. So Nexus criteria, essentially, you have somebody laid out in front of you. What I do to clear a C-spine in the emergency department is I ask them questions. Number one, I want to ascertain the level of consciousness, and so if they're appropriate, they're awake and alert, they're able to speak with me, then I know that they're GCS, that term, that Glasgow Coma Scale. Glasgow, as in Glasgow, Scotland, the Coma scale. 15 is as good as it gets, and you get 3 points for just showing up, if you're just there. A dead body is a GCS of 3. So 15, if you want to communicate, well, the GCS is whatever, you can look it up. There's a lot of criteria. Sometimes it's hard to remember everything. If you get down to 8, then that's intubation belt, then you probably need to tube the patient. But if they're above that, then they're probably okay, 9, 10, tenuous. If the GCS starts to dip down below, they say 8 is your cutoff. But I mean, you can't just shut your brain down and say, oh, you're 9, you're good. Oh, you're 7, you got to intubate. I mean, that doesn't work that way. But just to be aware, the nexus criteria is there's no obvious neurological deficit, meaning that they're able to speak with you, they're able to recall information, they don't have a problem with that, they're able to locate where their injury is at. Number 2 is they don't have any drugs, narcotics, alcohol on board. Number 3 would be that they don't have a distracting injury, meaning like a long bone or femur injury, where that is such an overriding issue with them. They have so much pain in that leg that they can't discuss anything else with you, that they would distract them from pain when you push in the back. And they have to be old enough that they know their minds. So like a 3-year-old probably can't nexus them as easily, although I push the limits sometimes with that. So those are the big things with nexus. So anybody in this room can do a nexus exam on someone. You simply push around the base of the skull, all the way down to the C6 prominence, C7's prominence, you know where that's at if you feel the back of your head. And to most people, you can feel that. It's the one that sticks out the most. So if you can track all the way down, posterior midline, from the top of the, I should say the top of the spine, bottom of the skull, down to that C7s and then beyond, if you can do that, you're in good shape. And you're and if they meet those other criteria, you probably don't even need to C-spine if you want to reassure yourself in your brain that you're not messing something up, okay? So we can talk about the zones of the neck, and then we'll work our way down. The zones of the neck, this is kind of an antiquated thing. I don't know that it really needs to be discussed anymore because of CT. It used to be when we had to explore the zones of the neck that everybody wanted to know. The trauma surgeon, the ENT wanted to know, well, what zone is it? Is it a zone 1 injury? Is it a zone 2 injury? Is it a zone 3 injury? I put this in more for historical completeness so that you're aware of where the zones are. But because we have helical scanners and we can scan somebody quickly and we can do angios and you can look at vessel injury, it's not become so much an issue. So, I mean, zone 1, again, just so you're aware of these zones, and if anyone wants to talk about zones, then you'll be aware of it. This is it extends from the clavicle to the cricothyroid membrane, okay? So that would be right here in your clavicle. In your cricothyroid membrane, if you just want to get used to your own anatomy, if you're a big man, sometimes you won't be able to feel this, but if you run your finger up here and you come to a little divot, guys especially who have an Adam's apple that's protuberant, you can feel it. So before you get to this part, this is your thyroid cartilage. You feel that sticks out on men. Just go down a little bit, you'll feel a divot. That's your cricothyroid membrane. Okay, so that's where you would crike, quote unquote, crike somebody. That's zone 1. So what lives there? The aortic arch, the top of the lungs is there. Your brachial plexus, which is responsible for allowing you to move your arm. Nerve bundles that come off there. The thoracic duct, which basically has your lymphatics and your vertebral arteries all live into that area. They branch out from the back of the neck. Those are the vertebrals. And this is a good cartoon for that. I always think of zone 1. I think zone 1 should start up here. Zone 2 should be here, and then zone 3 here. But in people's infinite wisdom, they decide to go from here and track their way up. So it's an inverted way of thinking. Thankfully, you don't have to really be responsible for it because no one's going to talk about it. But zone 3 is up here, 2, and then 1. So any penetrating trauma can sometimes be described. And you find old timers who've been in the game a long time will talk about zones and that once in a while. But most ENTs don't care about it. It's a non-issue. Okay? So the zone 2 is the carotid arteries, the jugular veins, and if you look back here, that seems to carry the most odds of being shot. So the majority of your injuries to the neck are going to be zone 2. If someone stabs you like that, they give you the jabby stabby in prison or something with like a sharpened toothbrush or something, probably going to end up in zone 2. Okay. Oops. All right. So larynx, proximal esophagus, hypopharynx, all those things. And then zone 3 is self-evident. That's extends from the mandible. You talk about the angle of the mandible. You can't see my beard here, but right in through here and then up to the base of the ear, kind of in that area, and the skull. That's where the majority. That's where your zone 3 injuries are, and that's real hard to access. It's real hard to assess. So on most people, you say, this is my zone 2 stuff. So if you have a question about where it's at, what zone it's at, it's going to be zone 2 9 times out of 10. Just like your Salter-Harris fractures, 90% of the time are going to end up being Salter-Harris 2. The same with the zone injuries in terms of what's accessible. Okay. So the reason the neck is an area that's bad is because in terms of injuries, I mean, it does a great job, but you have all these important structures, vessels, nerves, airway, compacted in this tight package, and it's very accessible to people. And if you think about fight or flight, what's interesting is physiologically the way you're made is if you're in a fight with someone or you start to, if you're concerned about stuff, the first thing you watch boxers when they fight, and this is sort of a thing that's drilled into them, is they always bring their shoulders up. You ever seen anybody, an animal, people, the first thing that happens is this, they do this. Well, it's because Mother Nature, God, knows that these are all these important structures in here. So before you get struck in the side of the neck, and the anterior part of the neck, you're burying your chin, and you're bringing your shoulders up, and then this comes down, shoulder comes up. So you'd rather probably get stabbed here than in zone 2 or something like that. So just be aware that Mother Nature has all these built-in safety mechanisms to protect that part of your neck. You don't want to get those areas injured. And again, zone 2 injury is probably the most common injury. That's the one you're going to see the most often. And again, just to belabor this is a reconstruction from a CT. We talked about 2. You see from 2 down to 3, that's the majority of the area. And then up to the base of the skull, really it's up around the ear. The external auditory canal is right beneath that top line, okay? All right, so I think as pre-hospital, what are you going to do about somebody getting stabbed in the neck or shot in the neck? I think you're going to look at it, if you see an expanding hematoma, you're going to put pressure on it, and that's about all you're going to do. Thankfully, there's a thing called the Circle of Willis. You guys all familiar with the Circle of Willis? To the base of the head, and so even if one carotid artery is severed or completely gone, you still have flow and you can still perfuse the other side of your head. So if I knock out this artery with the stab wound or with the gunshot wound, there's expanding hematoma that's going to impinge on something, I can still get blood to the rest of my head. And I don't even have to have this carotid artery. And they can even ligate it if they have to. If it's completely obliterated and the guys can't put it back together, that's not a big deal. But you have all, like I said, all these structures are there. You need to be familiar with the airway, vascular, and digestive. An interesting thing to talk about, we didn't talk about, it's harkening back to the combat casualty care course. These people put X in front of ABC, right? Airway, breathing, circulation. But then circulation kind of becomes X. You know what X stands for? Exsanguination, right? And so for a long time it was ABC, ABC, and people would worry about airway. And they say, oh, I better get this guy intubated. Oh, but you know, he's breathing from his brachial artery, or that femoral artery needs to be tied off. And so that's something to be aware of in this situation. Before you want to try to tube somebody or get after that, if they're bleeding big time, you want to do that. I've had old ladies drop their hemoglobin just because they fell and bashed their heads open, and I didn't get after it right away. They came back from CT, the entire pillow's all full of blood. Nobody said anything to me, and then I'm working big time, like in a 90-year-old, to try to get their blood pressures up because they bled so much. So sometimes the first thing you need to do is address those bleeding areas, especially from the top of the head or severing injuries to the hand, corn picker, stuff like that. If it doesn't just all get twisted up and kind of clotted off, you need to be aware of that. So I would say always keep that in mind, that mantra of X, A, B, C, when dealing with any kind of extremity trauma, major trauma, gunshot wounds, that sort of thing. Cricothyrotomy is a skill that I don't use very much. The only time I've ever done it on people, I had nursing home patients and people who had Downs or mentally disabled. Excuse me, I didn't just spit on you there. Did I get you? Good. And we had to crike them because they ate a bunch of pancakes and they stuffed their mouth with peanut butter. Peanut butter is impossible to intubate around. That's real tough. So they would just eat and eat and eat. You know, sometimes you get that Globus sensation if you eat too much peanut butter, you know, chase it with something. And it's a difficult skill. We had Kelly Brown had a patient who had epiglottitis and lost her airway, which is exceedingly rare. And she tried to crike her, and she's a big, heavy lady with a big turkey neck, and it didn't go well. So these are always clusterfucks, excuse my language, but it never turns out very well. It's always really hard. And so I'd rather not do those if I could help it. If you can intubate somebody, you always want to intubate somebody using their natural tissues, their natural pathways, rather than do this stuff. This is inherently unnatural. It's not a natural thing. And unless you're ENT and you're really familiar with the anatomy, that makes it hard. That being said, I mean, some EMS services will try to crank people. You know, I've heard about things like that. I think that's hard, and I think you open yourself up to litigation potentially if things don't go right. But anyway, when I talk about the neck injury, we've already kind of beat this up, but I think the biggest thing that we'll be able to do is we'll be able to put pressure directly on a wound, and that's what you're going to want to do. And if you see an expanding hematoma, then just being aware of the airway, and that's all I would say about that ultimately. But applying pressure first is going to be the best bet. And if they go out and you need some sort of other airway, then you could always add an airway at some point. But I think the big thing is pressure to stop that bleeding. I mean, that's really a basic thing, but every day I do pressure on wounds. I do that all the time. Hold pressure here. the nurse will hold pressure, and so it's going to be, you just want to, it's the basic stuff, the simple stuff that's not super sexy that I think helps people the most. A lot of these in Zone 2 especially were explored. Again, I've talked about CT. I found CT to be extremely helpful, and also ultrasound to be extremely helpful. We can tell a lot about what's going on in a person's neck when they come in. Many more people get the MAN scan. That's the stem to stern, that's the head, neck, chest, abdomen, pelvis. And so as long as the bleeding's controlled, they get their neck done, and it's all contrast studies, and so you will see if there's a blush or some area that's bleeding. As long as they're hemodynamically stable, they can usually go over to CT. And we can get a MAN scan done in almost in less than 10 minutes with the 64 slice, so that's really quick. So let's move on to the abdomen. Does anybody have any questions about neck wounds, like chest type wounds? I mean, it's pretty straightforward for our purposes. That's all OR stuff. There's not much to really do. You can do the interventions you need to do, but it becomes self-evident, and hopefully your response times won't be that long that you can get into the hospital. All right. For a long time, the teaching mantra was that anybody had a gunshot wound to the abdomen, they needed to go to the OR and they needed to be explored. And that means they would run the bowel. So I can remember as a medical student, they would give you a big open wound, they would do a laparotomy, and they'd find your bowel, and they would just do this with it. And then kind of look at it, and it looks good, and then they would run the bowel. That's what it was called. So anymore, because of CT, the avenue of CT, we don't have to do that as much. At one time, they had a thing called a DPL. Does anybody know what a DPL is? That's where you would actually make an incision along the umbilicus, you would pour them full of saline, you joust the person back and forth, and then you would suck out this diagnostic peritoneal lavage, and then you would look to see if a bunch of corn or something like that, was in there because they had ruptured their bowel from a gunshot wound or stab wound. Okay, pretty antiquated. I've never done a DPL. DPLs were on their way out, so that's something they used to do. It was painful. It's not, since we have CT now, we don't have to do any more of that stuff. We've already talked about guns. They're not death rays. They're not like laser guns. They don't burn holes in people. They're not phasers. This isn't Star Trek, and so. Honestly, in my experience, I see a lot of people that shoot themselves in the leg. We've had cops that have shot themselves. We've had cops shoot themselves in the hand. I've had people shoot themselves in the leg when they're holstering and they had their finger in the trigger. I've had people shot with 22s and 40s. And we've had people that have shot themselves in the face with shotguns and lived to tell the tale. I can talk about this later, not to get too anecdotal. So I had a guy that was shot in the face with a .308 from a sniper round when I was in residency, and he lived. He had all kinds of reconstructive stuff. So guns in and of themselves are lethal. There's potential for lethality, but a lot of it has to do with shot placement. Whereas hammers and clubs and Wolverine boots kill probably far more people, honestly, in a domestic setting. So we're not going to get rid of all the Chicago cutlery, probably, but how many people that are killed just on the road. There's a real imbalance. Your chances of getting shot are pretty slim, as long as you don't live in Rwanda or you're not a Christian somewhere in Nigeria and Boko Haram's not over waiting for you at your church. You're probably not going to get shot, or stabbed for that matter, if you have good associates. But if you're into drugs or you go to dangerous places, then your chances increase. It's hammer time. All right, so gunshots, the wound. Most of the time they'll enter the peritoneal cavity. The peritoneal cavity is this area to this area. This is my pleural space, down to the dome of the diaphragm. This is my peritoneal cavity. And the reason a lot of gunshots end up in there is because it's big. Proportionally to the rest of your body, it's pretty big, and so a gunshot can enter into this area. And if it goes through a bowel, gets in the bowel, then you have a problem, and you have a leaky bowel. And the potential for stool emptying into your belly is bad. You can develop a thing called peritonitis, and so that's why they would run the bowel. But then the question is, do we always need to do that? It depends on the trauma surgeon. I can tell you in Dubuque, you're probably going to end up getting scanned. You're probably going to go to the OR because we just don't take care of enough. You need to be in a big, high-volume trauma center where they would say, oh, we'll just watch them, basically. So what lives in your bowel? You have all your organs, your soft, your viscous organs, your small bowel, colon, okay? This is an example of some free air. You see the air there where the bullet tumbled through and didn't actually go into the peritoneal cavity. This is CT. Everybody's familiar with CT. CT is like bread slices, cuts through here. This is at the level, this would be just at the level of beneath the kidneys. Getting down there pretty far, but entered in here, scathed around the outside, and came out, entrance and exit. So this patient didn't even have any peritoneal issues. This is a grade 3 liberal laceration. You'll see that on CT though. You give CT. And a lot of these are not operative, believe it or not. That all started in the pediatrics world where we would do non-operative surgery on splenic injuries and liver injuries because a lot of the kids would do fine. Otherwise, they were getting their spleens removed, and they said 5-6 years they ended up getting septic and sick because you really need your spleen. there's a lot of important stuff. It's not just one of those useless organs. And so non-operative type techniques or kind of the wait and see approach to a lot of these gunshot wounds have taken over in recent years. Now, I'm not a trauma surgeon, and we don't take care of, we don't have enough volume of gunshot wounds, but if you're in Baltimore, if you're in Chicago,